A moving story of redemption, love, passion, and new beginnings, she cleaned the halls of an elite school, until she was humiliated in front of everyone. What no one expected was the scream that would change everything. "She's my mother!" And that was just the beginning of a scandal that could destroy an empire. Watch this story until the end. You will be surprised by this story. If you like love stories, romance, subscribe to this channel. Leave your comment. Every day we post videos like this, continuing. The alarm clock rang at 4:30 in the morning as usual. Helena Anders opened her eyes in the small two-room apartment in the city, where the rumble of trains was a constant symphony that she had learned to ignore. At 47, her movements were precise, economical, shaped by decades of routine. That began before sunrise and ended when São Paulo finally fell asleep. She got up silently. In the next room, Nicola was fast asleep, his book still spread out on the makeshift desk she had assembled with a board and 2 easels. 18 years old, he had a full scholarship at the Élysée College, one of the most prestigious in the capital. Her son was a prodigy, and she would do anything to keep him just that in the eyes of the world. Helena made the coffee in silence, her gestures measured by practice. 2 cups, one for herself, which she would drink quickly before leaving, another that she would leave on the table for Nicholas to find when he woke up. A banana, a roll with margarine, and a note. "There's money for lunch in the drawer. I love to you." Always the same careful handwriting, always the same words that carried all the weight of a love she could not express publicly. The 5:15 bus took her through the sleeping city. Helena looked out the window at the empty streets, the buildings that were beginning to turn on their first lights, and felt the familiar tightness in her chest. It wasn't regret. She would never regret Nicholas. It was a kind of melancholy that had been with her ever since that day, 18 years ago, when she discovered she was pregnant, and that the man she loved was beyond her reach, protected by walls of money and a family name that she could never climb. The Élysée School occupied an entire block in Villa Madalena, its facilities rivaling those of the best universities in the country. Helena knew every hallway, every room, every corner where the dust tried to hide. She always arrived at 6 in the morning, an hour before the first administrative staff member, 2 hours before the first students. It was in the silence that she felt safest, when she could work without stares, without questions, without the risk of anyone noticing the similarity between her and the young man who walked the same hallways with his impeccable uniform and his backpack full of dreams. That Thursday morning, Helena was cleaning the main hall when she saw Nicholas arriving. He walked straight to the stairs, as he always did, without looking in her direction. It was part of the unspoken agreement they had. At school, they were strangers. She was Helena, the silent cleaner. He was Nicholas, the brilliant scholarship to student. 2 worlds that coexisted in the same space, but never touched in the eyes of others. But that morning, as she wiped the banister, Helena couldn't help but notice him. Nicholas had grown so much in the last few months. His voice was deeper, his shoulders were broader, and there was something about the way he walked that reminded her of someone she'd rather forget. The same elegant gestures, the same upright posture, the same way he tilted his head when he was thoughtful. Eduardo Monterrey was imprinted on her son like an indelible mark, and Helena felt her heart race whenever she noticed these similarities. "Good morning, Mrs. Helena." Nicholas's voice made her jump. He had returned, standing a few steps above, looking down with those dark eyes that were just like hers. "Good morning," she replied quietly, quickly glancing around to make sure no one saw them. "You forgot this at home." He walked down a few steps and discreetly handed her a small bottle of headache medicine. Helena had left it on the kitchen table the night before, along with the papers she was organizing for work. "Thank you," she muttered, tucking the vial into her uniform pocket. It was a simple gesture, but a risky one. If anyone saw it, they might question why a student was talking to the cleaning lady. Nicholas hesitated for a moment, as if he wanted to say something more, but the sound of approaching voices made him rush upstairs. Helena went back to work, but her hands were shaking slightly. These small moments of connection were both her greatest comfort and her greatest fear. The hours passed in the familiar routine. Helena cleaned the classrooms, tidied the bathrooms, dusted the trophies in the principal's office. She avoided the hallways as much as possible during breaks, when students were free to roam. But sometimes, inevitably, she would run into Nicholas. He never greeted her at those times, and she pretended not to see him. It was a careful dance they had been performing for years, a game of invisibility that had become second nature. In the teacher's lounge, Helena heard snatches of conversation as she cleaned. They were talking about the charity event that was taking place that night, a gala to raise money for scholarships. Several prominent families would be in attendance, including some of the city's biggest businessmen. Helena knew that Nicholas would be giving a speech on behalf of the scholarship recipients, something he had been carefully preparing for over the past few weeks. "The schedule has changed," the educational coordinator said over the phone. "Nicholas's speech will be earlier, right after the opening cocktail party. And Helena, can you stay after to clean up? I know it's not your time, but we'll pay you overtime." Helena nodded. Extra money was always welcome, and she would be able to watch Nicholas speak even from afar, even if no one knew that this eloquent and brilliant young man was her son. The day passed slowly. Helena finished work at 3 in the afternoon as usual, but she would be back at 7 for the event. She had a few hours to go home, take a shower, and prepare dinner for Nicholas. He would get home from school soon, study a little more, and review his speech one last time. "How was today?" he asked when Nicholas walked into the house, throwing his backpack on the couch with a tired sigh. "Normal," he replied, heading toward the kitchen. "Nervous about tonight?" Helena watched him pick up the cup of coffee she had left that morning, still on the table, cold for hours. He drank it anyway, absent-mindedly, leafing through his speech notes. "You'll do fine," she said, sitting down at the table next to him. "You always do." Nicholas smiled, and for a moment the unspoken agreement between them dissolved. It was just a mother talking to her son, like millions of other mothers did every day. "Sometimes I wonder what it would be like if," he began, but stopped. "If what? If you could be there, really. Not as an employee. As my mother." Helena felt her throat tighten. "Nico, you know." "I know." He touched her hand briefly. "I know that's how it's supposed to be. I just imagine it sometimes, that's all." They remained silent for a few minutes. Outside, the city traffic was beginning to slow down. The sky was turning orange, announcing the end of another day. Inside the small apartment, mother and son shared a moment of intimacy that would sustain them for a few more hours of forced separation. "I have to be back at school at 7, Helena said finally. "I'll clean up after the event." "I know, I saw your supervisor talking to you today." Of course he had seen it. Nicholas had been watching everything just as she had. They had both developed a heightened awareness of their surroundings, always alert for any situation that might expose the secret they shared. At 6:30, Helena was ready. Her uniform was clean, her hair tied in a discreet bun, and her shoes were comfortable for a long night of work. Nicholas was also getting ready, adjusting the tie that the school had loaned him for the occasion. "Good luck," she said, quickly kissing his forehead. "Thank you, Mom." This was always how they said goodbye, when no one could hear them. "Mom," a simple word that carried all the love she couldn't show publicly. The Elysee College had been transformed when Helena arrived. Golden lights illuminated the facade, a red carpet covered the main entrance, and luxury cars began to arrive. Helena entered through the service entrance as always, greeting the other employees who had also been called to the event. The main hall had been decorated with white and gold flowers, round tables covered with linen tablecloths, crystals reflecting the lights from the central chandelier. It was a scene of elegance that Helena knew well. She had cleaned dozens of similar events over the years, but tonight was different. Tonight, her son would be the center of attention. "Helena, you are responsible for discreet cleaning during the event," the supervisor instructed. "If anyone spills anything, if ashtrays need to be replaced, that kind of thing, then when everyone leaves, we do a thorough cleaning." Helena nodded and positioned herself discreetly on the side of the room where she could observe without being noticed. The guests began to arrive, Men in impeccable suits, women in dresses that cost more than she could earn in 6 months, young people who exuded the confidence of those who never doubted that the world belonged to them. And then she saw him. Eduardo, Monterrey. 18 years. 18 years had passed since they had last been in the same room, and Helena felt as if all those years had disappeared in an instant. He was different. The graying. Hair at his temples, lines around his eyes that had not been there before, a gravity in his bearing that spoke of accumulated responsibility and power, but it was unmistakably him, the man she had loved with an intensity that had nearly destroyed her, the man whose son had grown up without ever knowing his father. Eduardo greeted other guests, smiled for the cameras documenting the event, and spoke with the naturalness of someone born into that world. Helena forced herself to breathe, slowly. He wouldn't see her. People like Eduardo Monterrey didn't see people like her. To him, she would be just part of the decoration, as invisible as the flowers on the tables. The opening cocktail party passed without incident. Helena moved discreetly, collecting empty glasses, cleaning up small accidents, keeping to the shadows. Her attention was divided between her work and carefully observing Eduardo, who seemed completely at ease in his natural element. When it was time for the speeches, the guests sat at their tables. Helena positioned herself at the back of the room near the service exit. The principal went up to the small stage set up for the occasion and began to speak about the importance of scholarships and how the school was committed to excellence and social inclusion. "And now," the director said with a proud smile, "I would like to call to the stage one of our most brilliant fellows, who represents the success of our fellowship program so well, Nicholas Anders." Helena felt her heart race as Nicholas took the stage. He was elegant, confident, but she could sense the subtle nervousness in the way he adjusted his tie before he began to speak. She knew his every gesture, every expression, every nuance of his personality. "Good evening," Nicola began, his clear, steady voice echoing through the room. "My name is Nicholas Anders, and 4 years ago I was honored to be accepted as a full scholarship student at the Élysée College." Helena watched the faces of the audience. Respectful attention, a few condescending smiles, the satisfaction of those who feel good about doing charity work. Eduardo was at a table near the stage, and she could see his profile clearly. He seemed interested in the speech, but there was no sign of recognition, no suspicion that he was looking at his own son. "When I arrived here," Nicholas continued, "I came from a very different reality than the one you know. My mother worked long hours a day to cover our basic expenses, and yet she always encouraged me to study, to dream big, to believe that I could be anything I wanted to be." Nicholas's voice became more emotional, and Helena felt her eyes fill with tears. He was talking about her, even if indirectly, even if no one knew. "What I learned here," Nicholas said, "is that talent has no social class, determination has no address, and that sometimes the most important people in our lives are those who work behind the scenes, who make silent sacrifices so that others can shine." That was when it happened. Helena had moved slightly to get a better view of the stage, but she hadn't realized she was holding a bucket of cleaning water. One of the waiters hurried past her, knocked over the bucket, and the water splashed across the floor with a noise that echoed through the hall. All heads turned. The silence was instant and awkward. Helena quickly bent down to pick up the bucket, her cheeks burning with embarrassment. It was exactly the kind of situation she had spent years trying to avoid, drawing attention to herself during an important event. "Look," said a male voice, loud enough to be heard by several people. It was one of the seniors, the son of a well-known banker. The cleaning lady managed to dirty the formal carpet. Muffled laughter began to circulate around the tables. Helena kept her head down, concentrating on mopping up the spilled water, wishing she could disappear. Some guests whispered to each other, others pointed discreetly in her direction. "Someone should teach the cleaning staff not to walk around during important events," one woman commented loudly, prompting more laughter. Helena felt each word like a slap in the face. Years of minor humiliations, of being treated as invisible, of swallowing her pride to protect her son's future, All converged in that moment of cruel exposure. She wanted to run away, hide in the bathroom until the event was over, pretend nothing had happened. But then she saw Nicholas on the stage. He had stopped talking and was looking directly at her. There was no shame in his eyes. There was fury. A cold, controlled anger that she recognized immediately, because it was the same anger she felt whenever she saw someone belittle hard-working, honest people. "Excuse me," Nicholas said into the microphone, his voice cutting through the laughter, and murmurs. "Excuse me." The hall fell silent again, but now it was a tense, expectant stillness. Nicholas stepped down from the stage with determined steps. Helena saw him approaching and felt panic. Not like this, not like that. Not in front of all those people. She shook her head almost imperceptibly, trying to dissuade him. But it was too late. "Do you want to know about sacrifice?" Nicholas said, stopping beside Helena, who was still crouched on the floor. "Do you want to know about dedication? About working behind the scenes so others can shine?" He held out his hand to help her up. Helena hesitated for a second, but the determination in her son's eyes made her accept his help. She stood up, still holding the cleaning cloth, completely exposed in front of 200 people, who watched her with curiosity and discomfort. "This woman," Nicholas said, his voice echoing clearly through the hall, "wakes up at 4:30 in the morning every day. She works 12 hours a day. She has never missed a day of work in 4 years. She knows every corner of this school better than any of you." Helena felt tears streaming down her face. She wanted to stop Nicholas. She wanted to protect him from the consequences of what he was doing, but her legs felt like they had roots in the ground. "You laughed when she spilled water," Nicholas continued, his voice gaining intensity. "You laughed at a woman who dedicates her life to keeping this place spotless for you. You laughed at someone who works so that you can feel comfortable at your fancy events." The silence was now absolute. Not a whisper, not a movement. Even the waiters had stopped circulating. "And do you know why she does this?" Nicola looked directly at the cameras documenting the event, then at the shocked audience. "Do you know why she accepts being treated as invisible? Why she swallows humiliations? Why she works until she can no longer stand?" Helena closed her eyes. She knew what was coming next, and there was no way to stop it. "Because she's my mother." The words exploded across the room like a bomb. The silence that followed was deafening. Helena opened her eyes and saw shocked faces, open mouths, cameras turning in their direction. And in the background, at one of the tables near the stage, she saw Eduardo Monterrey slowly getting up, his face pale as paper. "She's my mother," Nicholas repeated, quieter now, but still audible to everyone. "Helena Anders, the strongest, bravest, most dedicated woman I know. The woman who sacrificed everything so that I could be here today." Nicholas turned to Helena and, completely ignoring the audience, hugged her. She let herself be wrapped in her son's arms, feeling 18 years of secrets and silence melt away around them. When they parted, the room was still completely silent, but now it was a different kind of silence, not of shock or discomfort, but of something that felt like respect or perhaps embarrassment at his own behavior. It was then that Helena saw Eduardo approaching. He had left his table and was walking towards them, his eyes fixed not on Nicholas but on her. 18 years of distance were eliminated in seconds, and Helena found herself once again in front of the man she had loved and lost, who she had let go without ever knowing that he was carrying her child. Eduardo stopped a few feet away. His eyes traveled over Helena's face, then back to Nicholas, and she saw the exact moment when he understood. The similarities she saw every day, the ones she had learned to fear and hide, were obvious to anyone who knew where to look. The shape of his eyes, the way he tilted his head, the elegant gestures. Nicholas was unmistakably a Monterrey. "Helena," Eduardo said, his voice hoarse with emotion. It was the first time he had said her name in 18 years. She stared at him, feeling the world spin around her. All the explanations she had rehearsed in her mind, all the scenarios she had imagined for a possible reunion, disappeared from her mind. All she could do was look at the man she had loved, who she had lost, and who she now discovered was the grandfather of the grandson she never knew existed. "Is it true?" asked Eduardo, his voice barely audible. "Is he?" Helena nodded, unable to speak. Nicholas looked from one to the other, beginning to understand that there was something more at stake than the simple humiliation he had witnessed. The room began to stir. Whispers spread like waves, cameras moved, and Helena realized that life as she knew it was over. There was no going back, no more secrets. The truth was exposed, raw and inevitable, in front of the entire São Paulo, Elete, and the lenses that would broadcast the story to the entire world. Eduardo took another step toward her, reaching out as if to touch her, but Helena instinctively recoiled. 18 years of hurt, of loneliness, of raising a child alone while he lived his life of privilege, all of it built up between them like an insurmountable wall. "No," she whispered, "not here, not like this." And then Helena did what she had done 18 years before. She ran away, leaving Eduardo behind, taking with her only what really mattered. Her son, who ran after her without hesitation, abandoning the stage, the speech, and the entire carefully constructed life that had collapsed in a matter of minutes. But this time, unlike 18 years ago, Eduardo Monterrey didn't just stand by and watch the woman he loved disappear. This time he went after her. Helena ran through the halls of Élysée College as if she were running away from a fire. Her footsteps echoed off the walls she knew so well, but now everything seemed different, strange, as if she were an intruder. In the very place where she had worked for years. Nicholas ran after her, calling her name, but she couldn't stop. She needed to get out of there. She needed to think. She needed to process what had just happened. "Mom, wait," Nicholas's voice finally made her slow down. They were in the employee parking lot, away from the golden lights and curious eyes of the main hall. Helena turned around, gasping, tears streaming freely down her face. "Nico, what did you do? What did we do?" "I did what I should have done. Years ago." Nicholas stepped closer, gently holding her shoulders. "I couldn't watch you being humiliated anymore. I couldn't pretend I didn't know you anymore. But now everything has changed. Everything." Helena looked back, as if expecting to see the entire São Paulo elite running after them. "Your scholarship, your future, our lives." "Our life is based on lies," Nicholas interrupted. "Mom, I'm tired of hiding who we are. Tired of watching you diminish yourself so I can shine." Helena was about to answer when she heard footsteps approaching. Eduardo Monterrey appeared at the entrance to the parking lot, having taken off his tuxedo jacket, his tie loose, his hair slightly disheveled. Even so, or perhaps because of that, he was more handsome than Helena remembered. "Helena, please." Eduardo stopped at a respectful distance, but his eyes never left her face. "We need to talk." "We have nothing to talk about," Helena replied, instinctively placing herself between Eduardo and Nicholas. It was a protective gesture she had perfected over 18 years. "Yes, we do." Eduardo looked at Nicholas, and Helena saw something break in his gaze. "We have 18 years to talk." The silence that followed was filled with tension. Nicholas looked from one to the other, beginning to connect dots that had until then been only vague suspicions. Helena felt her heart beating so hard that she was sure they could both hear it. "You are my father." It was not a question. Nicholas said the words with the same certainty with which he had declared that Helena was his mother. Eduardo closed his eyes for a moment, as if absorbing the impact of the words. When he opened them again, they were moist. "I didn't know," he said, looking directly at Helena. "I swear by all that is holy, I didn't know." "Of course you didn't know." Helena's voice came out more bitter than she intended. "You were too busy being forced to marry Isabella Montenegro to consolidate the family business." The mention of Isabella's name made Eduardo recoil as if he had been punched. How did I know?" Helena laughed humorlessly. "I read it in the papers, Eduardo, just like all of São Paulo did. The wedding of the year, the union of two of the most powerful families in the country, 3 months after you told me you loved me." Nicholas looked from one to the other, as if he were watching a play, trying to understand a story that had begun long before he was born. "Helena, you don't understand." Eduardo took a step forward. "I didn't want to marry her. I was forced to. My father said that if I didn't, he would destroy everything I had built. all the social projects of the pharmaceutical company, all the people who depended on me. And I was just a temporary distraction, wasn't I? Helena felt all the pain of 18 years coming back to the surface. The daughter of the cleaning lady who cleaned your company's office. Good for a few weeks of fun, but not to take home. No. Eduardo's voice echoed through the parking lot. You were never a distraction. You are the only woman I've ever truly loved. Helena shook her head, not wanting to believe his words. Then why didn't you fight for me? Why did you choose her? Because I was a coward. The confession came out of Eduardo in a painful sigh. Because I was 25 and terrified of disappointing my father, of losing everything I thought defined who I was. But Helena, I looked for you. When I got back from our honeymoon, I went to your apartment, to your work. You were gone. Because I was pregnant. The words burst out of Helena with a force that surprised her. I was pregnant and terrified. And you were married to another woman. What was I supposed to do? Knock on your door and say, "Hi, remember me? I'm expecting your baby." Eduardo turned pale. You considered telling me. Helena looked at Nicholas, who was absorbing every word of the conversation, with an expression that mixed fascination and pain. Every day, she admitted. For months, every single day I thought about calling you, about showing up, at your company, about sending you a letter. But then I saw the pictures of the two of you in the newspapers, smiling, happy, and I realized there was no place for me in that life. Happy? Eduardo laughed bitterly. Helena, my marriage with Isabella lasted exactly 2 years. 2 years of pretense, of lies, of failed attempts to build something real on a rotten foundation. We got divorced because we couldn't even pretend to stand each other anymore. This information hit Helena like a bolt of lightning. She knew that Eduardo had gotten a divorce. It was impossible not to, considering that the divorce had been as widely reported as the marriage. But she never learned the details, never allowed her mind to wander to the reasons why. 2 years, she repeated. Nicholas was 2 when you got divorced. And I didn't know he existed. Eduardo looked at his son with an expression of profound loss. 2 years that I could have been there. 18 years of missed birthdays, of first words I didn't hear, of nights you spent awake when he was sick and I didn't even know I had a son to care for. Nicholas, who had remained silent throughout the entire discussion, finally spoke. Where were you when I was little? Eduardo turned completely to him, and Helena saw tears in the eyes of the man she had learned to hate and love in equal measure. I was lost, Eduardo said simply. Working 20 hours a day to keep my mind off your mother, trying to build something that had meaning since I had lost the only thing that really mattered, creating scholarship programs, funding social projects, trying to make up for being a coward when it mattered most. The scholarship programs, Nicholas muttered. The scholarship I won, it's funded by Monterey Lab, Eduardo confirmed. We created the program 6 months after my divorce. I was trying to find a way to honor what I felt for your mother. I never imagined that you were paying for your own son's education, Helena added, feeling a bitter irony in the situation. My God. Eduardo ran his hands through his hair. All these years you raising our son alone, working as a cleaner at the school where he studied with a scholarship I financed. It's like the universe is mocking us all. Helena felt her legs weaken. The adrenaline of the revelation was wearing off, and the reality of the situation was starting to set in. Eduardo, you don't understand. This doesn't change anything. You may have created scholarship programs. You may have gotten divorced. You may have looked for me 18 years ago. But I raised Nicholas alone. I worked 3 jobs when he was little. I stayed up all night when he had a fever, and I couldn't afford a private doctor. I went to every school event, every parent-teacher meeting, every performance, all by myself. And you did an incredible job. Eduardo looked at Nicholas with genuine pride. He is extraordinary, Helena. Intelligent, brave, honest, everything. He is. He owes to you. Don't try to win me over with compliments, Helena said, but her voice came out less firm than she intended. It's not strategy. It's the truth. Eduardo took another step towards her. Helena, I know I don't have the right to ask for anything. I know I can't go back in time and fix my mistakes, but I can try to build something from now on. With you two. No. Helena shook her head vigorously. No, Eduardo. You can't just show up after 18 years and want to be a part of our lives. It doesn't work that way. Why not? It was Nicholas who asked, surprising both adults. Helena turned to her son in disbelief. Nico. Mom, I've spent my whole life wondering about my dad, dreaming about him, imagining what it would be like if he ever showed up. And now he's here. He won't stay, Helena said, looking directly at Eduardo. People like him don't stay with people like us. When the novelty wears off, when the guilt subsides, he'll go back to his world and we'll be heartbroken all over again. You're wrong. Eduardo spoke with a firmness that Helena didn't expect. I made the mistake of letting you go once. I won't do it again. You didn't let me go, Helena countered. You rejected me. You chose money and status over love. And I've regretted it every day since. Eduardo was close enough now that Helena could see the small lines around his eyes, the marks the years had left on the face she had loved so much. Helena, I know you have no reason to trust me. I know I don't deserve a second chance, but I'm asking anyway. Helena looked at Nicholas, who was watching their conversation with a hopeful expression that broke her heart. 18 years of protecting his son, 18 years of being strong, 18 years of being enough for both of them. And now Nicholas was looking at his father with the same eyes she had seen in the mirror when she was young and in love. You don't understand, she said finally. This isn't just about us. Tomorrow morning, the story will be in every newspaper. The photos, the videos, everything. Your reputation, your company, your social life, everything will be questioned. And when that happens, when you realize the price of publicly associating with us, you'll disappear again. Let me worry about my reputation, Eduardo said. The only thing that matters is that I found you. I found my son. I found the woman I could never forget. Helena felt the defenses she had built up over the years begin to crack. The way Eduardo looked at her was exactly the same as it had been 18 years ago, as if she were the most precious thing in the world. Mom, Nicholas said softly, maybe we could try? Helena looked at her son, saw the hope in his eyes and felt her heart break. How could she deny Nicholas the chance to meet his father? How could she deny herself the chance to find out if the love she had felt for Eduardo still existed after so many years? I need time, she said finally. I need to process all of this, and you two need to get to know each other without me in the middle. Eduardo nodded. How long do you need? I don't know. Helena was honest. Maybe days, maybe weeks. I don't know if I'll ever be able to trust you again, Eduardo. I don't know if I should. Then let me prove to you that I've changed, he said. Let me show you that this time I won't run away when things get tough. Helena was about to answer when she heard voices approaching. A group of people had left the event and were walking toward the parking lot. Among them, Helena recognized some of the most important guests of the evening, including journalists who had covered the event. Shit, Eduardo muttered. The press. We have to get out of here, Helena said, going into automatic protection mode. Nicholas, let's go. Wait. Eduardo gently grabbed her arm. You can't just disappear. Not again. Watch us, Helena replied. But before she could walk away, the first reporters caught up with them. Mr. Monterey, a woman with a microphone quickly approached. Is it true that the young man who gave the speech is your son? The cameras began to flash, and Helena felt panic. This was exactly what she had feared. The exposure, the public scrutiny, the transformation of their private lives into entertainment for the masses. Don't ask her any questions, Eduardo said, placing himself between Helena and the reporters. If you want to interview someone, talk to me. But Mr. Monterey, is it true that you had a relationship with an employee and that you have an unrecognized son? Helena saw Eduardo stiffen, but he maintained his composure. I will not discuss my personal life with you. Please have the minimum respect for the privacy of the people involved. What about the implications for Monterey Lab? Do the shareholders know that you have an undeclared heir? It was the question Helena had been waiting for, the one that confirmed all her fears about the financial and social consequences of Eduardo publicly associating himself with them. But Eduardo's answer surprised her. Monterey Lab has always been a company committed to social responsibility, he said calmly. If I find out that I have a son, it only reinforces my commitment to programs that help talented young people regardless of their social background. Now, if you'll excuse me, I'd like to have a private conversation with my family. My family. The words hit Helena like a bolt of lightning. Eduardo had publicly admitted that they were his family, in front of the cameras, in front of the reporters who would spread the news throughout the country. Helena grabbed Nicholas's hand and started walking quickly towards the bus stop, but Eduardo followed her, ignoring the shouts of the reporters behind them. "Helena, please, don't run away again." She stopped in the middle of the sidewalk, turning to face him. "Do you know what you just did? You publicly admitted that we are your family. Tomorrow it will be in every newspaper in the country." And none of this is real." The words came out louder than Helena had intended. "You don't know me anymore, Eduardo. I'm not the 22-year-old girl who fell madly in love with you anymore. I'm a 47-year-old woman, tired, wrinkled, with hands calloused from overwork. I clean bathrooms, Eduardo. I wake up at 4 in the morning and work until I can't take it anymore. That's my reality." "And you think that matters to me?" Eduardo was genuinely perplexed. "Helena, I didn't fall in love with you because you were young or beautiful, although you still are both. I fell in love with you because you were brave, determined, honest, because you saw me as a person, not a bank account. Because when I was with you, I felt real for the first time in my life." Helena felt the tears coming back. "You don't understand. Our worlds are too different. You offer dinners at restaurants that cost what I earn in a month. Your clothes cost more than my rent. How could this possibly work?" "The same way it worked 18 years ago," Eduardo said simply. "With love." Nicholas, who had been watching the entire discussion in silence, finally spoke. "May I give my opinion?" Both adults turned to him. "You're both scared," Nicholas said with the wisdom of someone who had grown up observing the adult world from the outside. "Mom, you're scared of getting hurt again. And you," he looked at Eduardo, "are scared of not being good enough to make up for 18 years of absence." Helena and Eduardo remained silent, absorbing the young man's words. "But you know what I think?" Nicholas continued. "I think you should try. Not for me, although I would love to meet my father, but for yourselves. Because 18 years ago, you loved each other, and from what I just saw, you still do." Helena looked at Eduardo, saw the vulnerability in his eyes, and felt something moving inside her chest. It was fear, it was hope, it was love, it was terror, all mixed together in an emotion so intense that she could barely breathe. "I need to go home," she said finally. "I need to think about all this away from here, away from you." Eduardo nodded, but before she could pull away, he gently touched her arm. "Helena, I know you have no reason to believe me, but I'm going to prove that I've changed. I'm going to prove that this time I'm not leaving." Helena stared at him for a long moment, memorizing the face that had haunted her dreams for nearly 2 decades. "How?" she asked. "How will you prove it?" Eduardo smiled, and for the first time since their reunion, Helena saw a glimpse of the young man she had fallen in love with. "Showing up," he said simply. "Every day if necessary, until you believe I won't disappear." Helena shook her head but couldn't suppress a small smile. It was exactly the kind of stubborn answer Edward would have given when they were young. "Come on, Nico," she said, taking her son's arm. "We have a lot to talk about." As they walked towards the bus stop, Helena heard Eduardo calling behind them. "Helen!" She turned around. "I never stopped loving you," he shouted, completely ignoring the passers-by who had stopped to watch the scene. "Never." Helena felt her heart race and her cheeks burn. It was exactly the kind of dramatic, public declaration Eduardo had often made when they were young, impulsive, intense, completely without regard for social convention. She didn't answer, but she also couldn't stop smiling as she and Nicholas boarded the bus that would take them back home. Throughout the ride, Nicholas watched her curiously. "You still love him, don't you?" Nicholas asked when they were almost home. Helena looked out the window, watching the city lights pass by. "It doesn't matter, Nico." "Of course it matters. It's the only thing that matters," Helena sighed. "It's complicated." "Love is always complicated," Nicholas said with the wisdom of someone who had grown up watching his mother alone. "But sometimes it's worth it anyway." When they reached the apartment, Helena sat on the couch and finally allowed all the tension of the night to wash over her. She cried, with relief, with fear, with hope, with pain. Nicholas sat down next to her and held her, and for the first time in 18 years, Helena allowed herself to think that maybe, just maybe, they wouldn't have to face the world alone. The next morning arrived with the force of a hurricane. Helena woke up to the insistent sound of the phone ringing, and when she looked at the clock, it was only 6 in the morning. Outside, she could hear voices, strange movements on the normally silent city street. "Mom!" Nicholas appeared in the bedroom doorway, still in his pajamas, holding his cell phone. "There are people downstairs, reporters." Helena quickly got up and went to the window. Outside the building, a small crowd was gathering. Cameras, microphones, TV station vans. Her life had become a public spectacle overnight. The phone rang. Again. Helena answered with trepidation. "Helena!" It was the voice of Marissa, her supervisor at school. "Have you seen the news?" "What news?" "Turn on the TV, morning channel, any channel." Helena ran into the living room, Nicholas already holding the remote control in his hand. The first image that appeared on the screen was of herself, crouched on the floor of the Élysée College, picking up the bucket of spilled water. The reporter's narration was dramatic. The humiliated cleaning lady who revealed herself to be the mother of the millionaire heir. "My God," Helena muttered, falling onto the couch. The story went on to show the moment Nicholas yelled that she was his mother, the confrontation in the parking lot, Eduardo publicly admitting that they were his family. There was even an old photo of Helena and Eduardo together that someone had gotten from somewhere, probably some old Monterey lab employee. Helena Anders, 47, has worked as a cleaner for more than 10 years, the reporter continued. Her son Nicola, 18, is a full scholarship student at the prestigious Élysée College and has just been identified as the unrecognized son of businessman Eduardo. Monterey, owner of the pharmaceutical company Monterey Lab, valued at more than 2 billion reais. The phone rang again. This time it was an unknown number. "Hello? Ms. Helena, this is the program Cidade Alerta. We would like to do an exclusive interview with you about your relationship with Eduardo Monterey." Helena hung up immediately. But the phone rang again seconds later. Another program, another interview request. Nicholas unplugged the phone. "They won't leave us alone," Helena said, running her hands through her hair. "I knew this would happen." The apartment doorbell rang. Helena and Nicholas looked at each other. "Don't answer," she whispered. But the doorbell kept ringing, insistently. Then they heard a familiar voice outside. "Helena, it's me, Eduardo. Please open up." Nicholas walked over to the intercom. "How did you get here? There are reporters downstairs." "I entered through the parking lot of the building at the back." "Helena, I need to talk to you." Helena hesitated but nodded to Nicholas, who unlocked the door. Minutes later, Eduardo knocked on the apartment door. When Helena opened it, she was shocked by his appearance. He was wearing the same clothes as the night before, wrinkled, his hair disheveled, and he had dark circles under his eyes. "Did you sleep?" she asked, unable to help herself. "How could I sleep?" Eduardo entered the apartment, looking around. It was the first time he had been there, and Helena felt a strange mixture of shame and defiance. The apartment was small, simple, but clean, and organized. Each piece of furniture had been bought with great effort. Each object had a story of sacrifice. "Eduardo, you shouldn't be here," Helena said. "The reporters." "To hell with the reporters." Eduardo turned to her, and Helena saw something in his eyes that she hadn't seen the night before. Absolute determination. "Helena, we need to talk. All three of us. About what's next." "What's next?" Helena laughed humorlessly. "What's next? is that in a few days the media interest will pass. You'll go back to your usual life and Nicholas and I will have to deal with the consequences of having our privacy shattered." "No," said Edward firmly. "That's not what's going to happen." Nicholas, who had been silent, finally spoke. "What do you mean?" Eduardo turned to his son, and Helena saw tears in his eyes. "I've lost 18 years of your life, Nicholas. 18 years of watching you grow up, of helping you with your homework, of taking you to play ball in the park. I'm not going to miss another day." "Eduardo," Helena began, but he interrupted her. "And you," he turned to her. "You spent 18 years raising our son alone, working 3 jobs, sacrificing yourself, giving up your own life to give him everything he deserved. That's over. From today on, you don't have to worry about money ever again." Helena felt a familiar anger rising in her chest. "You think it's about money? You think you can just show up here and solve everything with money?" "No, I know it's not about money." Eduardo took a step toward her. "It's about family, it's about love. It's about me finally having the courage to fight for what matters." The phone rang again. Nicholas had plugged it back in. It was Marisa again. "Helena, you need to know, the school board has been meeting since 7 this morning. Parents are calling, wondering if it's appropriate to have an employee who had a relationship with one of the funders." Helena felt her world collapse. "They're going to fire me." "I don't know, maybe it's better if you don't show up today. Let me see how things unfold." When Helena hung up, she was pale. Eduardo and Nicholas watched her with concern. "What's wrong?" Nicholas asked. "I might lose my job." Helena sat down heavily on the couch. "Because of all this, I might lose my job." "You won't lose anything." Eduardo knelt in front of her, taking her hands. "Helena, I have enough influence to make sure that—" "No." Helena pulled her hands away sharply. "I don't want you to use your influence to protect me. I don't want favors. If I lose my job, I'll find another one. Why do you have to be so stubborn?" Eduardo stood up, frustrated. "Why can't you accept help?" "Because I don't want to owe you anything." The words came out louder than Helena had intended. "Because the last time I trusted you, you abandoned me. Because I've learned to rely only on myself. I was 25, Helena. I was a spoiled, cowardly boy, but I grew up. I changed." "Prove it," Helena said, crossing her arms. "Prove it to me." Eduardo looked at her for a long moment. Then he took his cell phone out of his pocket and dialed a number. "Roberto, it's me. I need you to call a press conference for this morning. No, it's not about the company, it's personal. I know you think it's crazy, but it's what I want. 1 o'clock in the afternoon at the Copacabana Palace Hotel." "Yes," I said, Copacabana Palace. "I want it to be a big event." When he hung up, Helena looked at him in disbelief. "Did you call a press conference?" "To publicly admit that Nicholas is my son and ask you to marry me." The silence that followed was absolute. Nicholas's eyes widened. Helena's mouth dropped. "Open." "You've gone completely mad," Helena whispered. "Maybe, but I also went crazy 18 years ago when I let you go." Eduardo approached her again. "Helena, I know you have every reason not to trust me. I know I hurt you in a way that is perhaps unforgivable, but I also know you still love me." "That doesn't matter," Helena said, but her voice was shaky. Of course it matters. It's the only thing that matters." Eduardo touched her face gently. "Helena, I can live without money, without a company, without social status. But I can't live without you. Not again." Helena felt her defenses crumbling, but she forced herself to stand firm. "Eduardo, you don't understand the implications of what you're proposing. A press conference, a wedding, you'll be ridiculed. Your friends, your family, your business associates, they'll all question your sanity." "Let them question it." Eduardo smiled, and Helena recognized the stubborn smile she had fallen in love with years ago. "The only opinion that matters to me is yours." Nicholas, who had been silently observing the entire conversation, finally spoke up. "Mom, he's offering you exactly what you've always wanted: recognition, public respect, a real family." Helena looked at her son, saw the hope in his eyes and felt her heart break. "Nico, it's not that simple." Why not? Nicholas insisted. You love each other, I can see that. You've always loved each other. Because love is not always enough, Helena said, but the words came out without conviction. Eduardo knelt in front of her again, taking her hands, and this time she didn't resist. Helena, 18 years ago I let fear decide for me. Fear of what my father would say, of what society would think, of disappointing the expectations they had placed on me. And because of that fear, I lost the two most important people in my life. Helena felt tears running down her face. This morning, Eduardo continued, when I woke up and saw our story in all the newspapers, when I read the cruel comments about you, when I heard the malicious speculation about our relationship, I felt the same anger I felt last night when they laughed at you. And I realized that no matter what they say, no matter the consequences, I will not let you face this alone again. Edward, marry me, he said simply. Marry me and let me spend the rest of my life making up for the 18 years we lost. Helena looked into his eyes and saw absolute sincerity. There was no calculation, there was no strategy, just raw, desperate love. What if it doesn't work out? She asked, her voice barely audible. What if we find out we're just two different people? Now? Then at least we'll have tried, together. Helena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of 18 years of solitude, struggle, and longing. When she opened them, Eduardo was still there, waiting patiently. The press conference is at 1 o'clock, she asked. Eduardo nodded. So we have 5 hours for you to convince me that you won't run away when the going gets tough. The smile that spread across Eduardo's face was radiant. He stood up and pulled her into a hug that Helena had dreamed of for almost 2 decades. It was like coming home after a very long trip. I'll convince you, he whispered in her ear, even if I have to spend the rest of my life proving it. Nicholas walked over, and the three of them hugged. It was strange, new, but it also felt natural. Like this was how it should always have been. We have a problem, Nicholas said, stepping away. You saw it downstairs. There are reporters everywhere. How are we going to get from here to the press conference? Eduardo smiled. Leave it to me. 2 hours later, a helicopter landed on the small soccer field 2 blocks from Helena's building. The crowd of reporters ran toward the noise, but when they arrived, the helicopter was already taking off, carrying Helena, Nicholas, and Eduardo away from the confusion. Did you rent a helicopter? Helena shouted over the noise of the blades. I bought it, Eduardo shouted back. I thought it might be useful. Helena shook her head but couldn't help but smile. It was exactly the kind of exaggerated romantic gesture Eduardo used to make when they were young. They landed on the terrace of the Copacabana Palace Hotel, where a team was already waiting for them. Eduardo had organized everything: clothes for Helena and Nicholas, makeup, hair, everything, to make them feel comfortable in front of the cameras. Eduardo, this is crazy, said Helena, observing the movement in the room where the press conference would be held. Dozens of reporters, cameras from various broadcasters, photographers. Look at all the people. I know. Eduardo adjusted his tie nervously. But it's the only way to control the narrative. If we don't speak up, others will speak up for us. What if I don't know what to say? Eduardo took her hands in his. Be yourself. That's all I ask. Be the brave, honest woman I met 18 years ago. When they entered the hall, the hubbub stopped instantly. Helena felt all the lenses turning on her, all the eyes analyzing every detail of her appearance, her behavior. But Eduardo held her hand firmly, and Nicola walked on the other side, and she remembered that she was not alone. Eduardo walked to the pulpit. Helena and Nicola stood beside him. Good afternoon, Eduardo began, his voice echoing through the silent room. I have called this press conference to clarify some facts about my personal life that became public last night. The cameras clicked incessantly. First, I want to officially confirm that Nicholas Anders is my son. He was born from a relationship I had 18 years ago with Helena Anders. the extraordinary woman who is by my side. Murmurs spread through the hall. Secondly, I want to make it clear that I was unaware of Nicholas' existence until last night. Helena raised our son alone, with a dignity and dedication that shames me. She has worked tirelessly to give him the best opportunities, including the education he receives at Élysée College, through a scholarship funded, ironically, by my own company. Eduardo paused, looking directly into the cameras. Third, and most importantly, I want to publicly declare my love for Helena Anders. 18 years ago, I made the mistake of letting her go out of cowardice and family pressure. I will not make the same mistake twice. The hall fell absolutely silent. Helena, Eduardo turned to her, will you marry me? The silence became deafening. Helena felt as if the whole world was waiting for her answer. She looked at Nicholas, who was smiling encouragingly, then at Eduardo, whose eyes shone with hope and terror in equal measure. Eduardo, she said, her voice amplified by the microphones, are you sure you want to do this? Do you really want to associate your name with mine in front of all these people? I've never been so sure of anything in my life. Helena took a deep breath. Then yes, I accept to marry you. The room exploded. Flashes went off. Reporters shouted questions. Cameras moved frantically. Eduardo pulled her in for a kiss that was photographed by dozens of lenses, and Helena let herself be carried away by the emotion of the moment. When they parted, the questions began to fly. Mr. Monterey, how did Monterey Labs shareholders react to the news? Helena, how does it feel to be catapulted from invisibility into the spotlight? Nicholas, did you always know who your father was? Eduardo answered the questions diplomatically but firmly. He made it clear that his personal life would not affect his business decisions, that Nicola would be officially recognized as the heir, and that any disrespectful comments about Helena would be considered a personal attack. Helena answered honestly about the challenges of being a single mother, how proud she was of her son, and how love sometimes deserves a second chance. Nicholas surprised everyone with his maturity, talking about growing up without a father, about admiring his mother's strength, and about being willing to get to know Eduardo without resentment. After an hour of questions, Eduardo ended the press conference with an announcement that left everyone speechless. To celebrate this new chapter in our lives, Helena and I will be getting married in 2 weeks, in a ceremony that will be broadcast live across the country. We want to share our happiness with everyone who has followed our story. When they left the hall, Helena was in shock. 2 weeks, Eduardo, have you completely lost your mind? Probably, but I'm also happier than I've been in 18 years. They went up to the suite Eduardo had booked at the hotel. It was luxurious with a view of Copacabana Beach, but all Helena could think about was the madness of the last 2 days. What now? She asked, throwing herself on the couch. What do we do now? Now, said Eduardo, sitting down beside her, we live our lives together. Nicholas was on the balcony admiring the view, and Helena took the opportunity to ask the question that had been tormenting her since the press conference. Eduardo, what if you regret it? What if in a few months, when the dust settles, you realize you made a mistake? Eduardo looked at her seriously. Helena, do you want to know what the biggest mistake of my life was? It wasn't marrying Isabella because of family pressure. It wasn't building a billion-dollar company based on appearances. The biggest mistake of my life was letting you believe, even for a second, that you weren't enough for me. He took her hands in his, kissing her work-calloused palms. These hands, he said, have built a worthy life for our son. These hands have worked when I should have been helping. These hands are more valuable to me than all the diamonds in the world. Helena felt tears running down her face. I'm so scared, Eduardo. I'm afraid too. Afraid that I won't be able to be the father Nicholas deserves. Afraid that I won't be able to make you happy. Afraid that 18 years of separation have changed us so much that we won't be able to reconnect. So why are we doing this? Eduardo smiled, wiping away her tears. Because sometimes fear is just another name for hope. And because I'd rather try and fail than live the rest of my life wondering what if. Nicholas walked in from the balcony at that moment. Sorry to interrupt, but there's something you need to see. He turned on the TV, and the first thing that appeared was an interview with Isabella Montenegro, Eduardo's ex-wife. Helena felt her stomach turn. Isabella, how do you feel about the revelation that your ex-husband has a son he didn't know about? The interviewer asked. Isabella, elegant, as ever, smiled coldly. Honestly, it doesn't surprise me at all. Eduardo has always been obsessed with this woman. Throughout our marriage, I knew I was competing with a memory. Helena looked at Eduardo, who had become tense. Do you think they'll be happy together? The interviewer continued. Happy? Isabella laughed. They live in completely different worlds. She's a cleaning lady, he's a billionaire businessman. It might be romantic now, but when reality sets in, when she realizes she can't keep up with his lifestyle, when he realizes she doesn't fit into his world, well, we'll see how long this passion lasts. Helena turned off the TV abruptly. She's right, isn't she? That's exactly what's going to happen. No, Eduardo said firmly. She's wrong. And do you know why? Because she never understood that I don't want a woman who fits into my world. I want a woman who makes me want to build a new world. With her. Eduardo stood up and walked to the sea. Window looking down at the beach. Helena, do you think I care about gala dinners, social events, the approval of people I barely know? All of that has always been an obligation, a part of the job. With you, for the first time in 35 years, I feel real. Helena approached him, touching his back. Eduardo, I don't know how to be the wife of a billionaire businessman. I don't know how to deal with the press, with social events, with people who will judge me at every step. Eduardo turned around, holding her face in his hands. So don't be the wife of a billionaire businessman. Just be my wife. The woman I love, the mother of my child, the person who makes me want to be better every day. What if people talk? What if they say you married a cleaning lady out of pity, out of obligation? Let them talk. The only opinion that matters to me is yours and Nicholas's. Nicholas, who had been watching the entire conversation, approached the parents. You know what I think? I think you're thinking too much. You love each other. I exist because of that love, and now we can finally be a real family. Everything else is just noise. Helena looked at her son, so young but so wise, and felt something resolve itself within her. You're right. It's that simple, isn't it? It's that simple, Eduardo agreed. Helena took a deep breath, and for the first time in 18 years, allowed hope to overcome fear. Then let's do it. Let's get married in 2 weeks and scandalize São Paulo society. Eduardo laughed, a sound full of relief and joy. Are you sure? I'm sure. Helena kissed him, and this time there was no fear, no reservations, just love, pure and intense as it had been 18 years ago. 2 weeks later, Helena Anders married Eduardo Monterrey in a live-streamed ceremony that broke viewership records. She wore a simple but elegant dress, he cried when he saw her walk down the aisle, and Nicholas was the one who handed her over to her father, symbolizing the union of a family that had taken 18 years to find each other. The tabloids had been talking about the wedding of the century for months, some criticizing it, others romanticizing it. But Helena and Eduardo no longer cared about what anyone was saying. They were too busy building the life they should have always had together. Helena never worked as a cleaner again, but she never forgot where she came from either. She created a foundation to help single working mothers, using her own story as inspiration. Eduardo discovered that being a father was even better than he had imagined, and Nicolas flourished, finally having a complete family. And every night as Helena fell asleep in the arms of the man she had loved for 2 decades, she smiled, thinking that sometimes happy endings really do happen. They just take a little longer to arrive.